Hey, welcome to Attack the Stack. If you like that, try this.
It can't be for nothing.
In September 2013, an outbreak of a mutant cordyceps fungus ravages the United States, transforming its human hosts into aggressive creatures known as the infected. 20 years later, civilization has been decimated by the infection. Survivors live in heavily policed quarantine zones, independent settlements, and nomadic groups. Players control Joel, a smuggler tasked with escorting a teenage girl, Ellie, across this post-apocalyptic United States.
Deceased had traveled in China before returning home 2 weeks ago. That must have been pre-quarantine. Unknown if had contact with livestock, but I can definitely see evidence of insect bites.
In this game, the player creates and evolves a pathogen in an effort to destroy the world with a deadly plague. The game uses an epidemic model with a complex and realistic set of variables to simulate the spread and severity of the plague and has attracted the attention and praise of the CDC. The core game of Plague Inc. Evolved is the same as Plague Inc. The player controls a plague which has infected Patient Zero. The player must infect and kill the whole world population by evolving the plague and adapting to various environments. However, there is a time pressure to complete the game before humans, the opponent, develop a cure for the plague. The developer has said that the game was inspired by Pandemic 2, a browser-based flash game released in 2008 by Dark Realm Studios.
You're afraid to be a part of something. We need you here, and that scares the hell out of you. We have to look out for each other.
A virus causes a large portion of humanity to become uncontrollably violent. 2 years later, civilization has collapsed, and vast hordes of the infected, now called freakers, roam the landscape and are a persistent threat to surviving humans. Set in a post-apocalyptic Oregon 2 years after the start of this global pandemic, former outlaw turned drifter Deacon St. John discovers the possibility of his wife, Sarah, still being alive, which leads Deacon on a quest to find her.
The devil came, made you bad for good.
Bloodborne takes place in Yharnam, a decrepit Gothic city known for its medical advances around the practice of blood ministration. Over the years, many travelers journey to the city seeking the remedy to cure their afflictions. The player's character journeys to Yharnam seeking something known as pale blood for reasons unknown. Upon arriving in the city, however, it is discovered that Yharnam is plagued with an endemic illness that has transformed most of its citizens into bestial creatures. The player must navigate the streets of Yharnam during the night of the hunt and overcome its violently deranged inhabitants and horrifying monsters in order to stop the source of the plague and escape the nightmare.
You don't get away that easily.
The game is set in Raccoon City in September 1998, 2 months after the events of Resident Evil. Most of the citizens have been turned into mindless creatures, referred to by survivors as zombies due to an outbreak of a viral bioweapon known as the T-Virus, manufactured by Umbrella Corporation. Players control rookie police officer Leon S. Kennedy and college student Claire Redfield, who is looking for her brother Chris Redfield as they attempt to escape Raccoon City during this zombie apocalypse. The game is set in 2027 in a fictional metropolis called Sunset City. The player controls an employee of Fizco who has to fight off the OD, short for overcharged drinkers, humans who have turned into mutants after drinking Fizco's energy drink beverage. On July 13, 2027, Fizco releases its new energy drink, Overcharge Delirium XT, also known as OCD, exclusively in Sunset City. In an attempt to sell OCD faster, Fizco skipped health regulation protocols, leading to the drink being so toxic that anyone who drinks it transforms into a violent, boiled-covered mutant known as an overcharged drinker. In order to cover up the deception, Fizco claims that a viral outbreak has happened and quarantines the whole city, preventing anyone from entering or exiting. The player, a Fizco employee who works in the sanitation division, is saved from an attacking OD by Walter, a fellow survivor. The player is unaffected by the drink as they were not allowed to attend the launch party for OCD, later referred to as Horror Night.
We are the last line of defense.
And I hope that you die.
In a near-future Washington, D.C., in the aftermath of the green poison, a potent strain of smallpox engineered and released in New York City by an environmental terrorist, you play an agent of the Strategic Homeland Division as you try to rebuild the city. Green poison resulted in casualties and chaos on a global scale. Facing imminent social collapse, the United States government activated a contingent of domestic sleeper agents called the Strategic Homeland Division, or simply the Division, to preserve order and continuity of government. Division agents leverage advanced technology and wide autonomy to deal with threats as they see fit.
I've received reports of armed attacks on shipments. There's not enough vaccine to go around, and the underclasses are starting to get desperate.
Of course they're desperate. They can smell their death, and the sound they'll make rattling their cage will serve as a warning to the rest.
A lethal pandemic known as the Grey Death ravages the world's population, especially within the United States, and has no cure. A synthetic vaccine, called Ambrosia, manufactured by the company VersaLife, nullifies the effects of the virus but is in critically short supply. Because of its scarcity, Ambrosia is available only to those deemed vital to the social order and finds its way primarily to government officials, military personnel, the rich and influential, scientists, and the intellectual elite. With no hope for the common people of the world, riots occur worldwide, and some terrorist organizations have formed with the professed intent of assisting the downtrodden. Set in this cyberpunk-themed dystopian world in the year 2052, the story follows J.C. Denton, an agent of the fictional agency United Nations Anti-Terrorist Coalition, or UNATCO, who is given superhuman abilities by nanotechnology as he sets out to combat the hostile forces in this world ravaged by inequality and a deadly plague. His missions entangle him in a conspiracy that brings him into conflict with the Triads, Majestic 12, and the Illuminati.
Where are we going?
Come on, just run as fast as you can!
Amicia de Rune and her young brother Hugo set out on a poetic and harrowing journey.
Set in 1348, hordes of ravenous rats have been spreading bubonic plague and devouring anything they come across. Amicia de Rune is a young girl of noble descent who lives with her family in rural Aquitaine, which has been invaded by the English army during the 100 Years' War. Her younger brother Hugo has been ill since birth, and their mother, Beatrice, an alchemist, has locked him away in the family estate for years while trying to devise a cure. You play as Amicia on her quest to protect her brother and find a cure to his illness, all while surviving the Inquisition that seeks his captivity and death.
Last time I saw my grandmother, she asked me was I still a praying man. I told her, yes ma'am.
Like its predecessor, Left 4 Dead 2 is set in the aftermath of a worldwide pandemic of an infectious disease known as the Green Flu, which rapidly transforms humans into zombie-like creatures and mutated forms that demonstrate extreme aggression towards non-infected, much like the infected in 28 Days Later. Few humans are immune to the disease, still carrying the infection but showing no symptoms. The Civil Emergency and Defense Agency and the US military create safe zones to attempt to evacuate as many American survivors as possible. Left 4 Dead 2 introduces 4 new survivors: Coach, Ellis, Nick, and Rochelle, who are immune to the disease. The 4 survivors have to fight their way through hordes of infected, using safe houses along the way to rest and recuperate in order to reach extraction points. In 2011, the inhabitants of a small northern African village are infected by an unknown hookworm parasite classified as alpha worm, which alters its host bodies and minds while increasing their strength and resilience. To prevent an outbreak, the military raid the quarantine zone and exterminate the infected, while the incident is covered up by the government. Military intelligence forms a containment task force called GUIDE for Global United Infestation Detection and Elimination, recruiting operatives from around the world. 4 years later, a GUIDE ninja team, including the young Ken Ogawa and led by his father Kanbei, is dispatched to Tokyo to contain a massive alpha worm outbreak. The game places the player in the fictional post-Soviet Republic of Chernarus, where a mysterious plague has turned most of the population into violent infected. The goal of DayZ is to stay alive and healthy during the conditions of the zombie outbreak that have befallen the in-game world. The player begins equipped with only simple clothes, a road flare, and a rag, and must begin exploring the large 225-kilometer landscape of the fictional former Soviet Republic of Chernarus to investigate locations such as houses, barns, and apartments to scavenge supplies. These supplies include food and water, which are basic keys to prolonging the player's life. Beyond the basics of survival, players can find various forms of clothing, which not only allow them to customize their characters, but can bring the benefit of extra storage space for supplies and warmth. Also scattered around the map are a variety of weapons, allowing players to protect themselves from zombies and other players if necessary. Whether you choose to cooperate with other players or not, the goal here is simple: survive the outbreak. If you liked the video or it helped you out, click the thumbs up button below. It really helps us out. If you think it could help others, share it. Of course, subscribe for more content like this and more. And if you have anything to add to our list, feel free to comment below. Thanks for watching and keep attacking.